Right, welcome back. This is the Thursday edition of the South African Morning. I'm Gareth Edwards. The COVID-19 pandemic, of course, had a massive negative impact on nearly every sector, but standout was the agricultural sector. It did maintain food security, even producing bumper crops. It's the only sector that didn't do badly, but that was in part due to political goodwill. The question is that goodwill going to continue? How are farmers going to deal with government with the pre-pandemic issues that are still continuing now? There were issues even before COVID-19 hit. So it's a complicated conversation. Let's now speak to agricultural economist Kobus Laubscher joining us on eNCA. Good to have you with us, Kobus. Appreciate your time this morning. So there's a lot we need to talk about as far as agriculture is concerned. There were issues before COVID that seemed to be handled well during COVID-19. So what is the relationship like between the agricultural sector and government? Good morning.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's quite an interesting development. You know, I've sensed what I call a paradigm shift with the January, lecture or whatever, the speech by the president. It removed some of the questions, so-called questions like land reform and stuff like that, focusing on what is really needed. Now, if you now discounted what is happening in Ukraine and with Russia and the world markets regarding food, that's totally turned around. You know, one has to look and see what impact does it has on South Africa. Now, very importantly is that we will have enough staple in terms of grains, maize. We will have enough of oils in terms of sunflower, etc. So yes, we're there to feed the people. Will be fed. Whether it will be affordable is the other challenge. But affordability it's not for the account of the farmers per se. You know. So yes, the farming sector, performed excellently during the pandemic because it's a biological process. You know, you cannot stop that kind of process. You cannot tell the cow to stop producing milk because of the pandemic. Yeah. So it shows its strength, and that's a very important thing that we can link on, that we can build on for the future. And the future will look very differently from what we have right now.
Kobus, I'm going to ask you a favor while I'm asking you the next question. If you don't mind, maybe just leaning forward. I believe your camera is off. Your audio is perfect, but we can get your camera on Zoom. That'll be great, Kobus, if you don't mind. While you're doing that, if you can find your camera for me, because what I'm trying to figure out is... Is it on?
Okay. Sorry, I see what you mean.
There we go. Hit on for me. That's not a problem. Okay, so as the conversations during COVID with government were going very, very well, is there a concern, Kobus, then, that now we're not out of the pandemic at all, but we're now into lower lockdown levels, state of disaster is just about over for COVID-19. Is there a concern that the conversations between the agricultural sector and government is going to start stagnating? Is that the concern?
Well, it's always a possibility, but I hope it will not happen, because what has been proven, the participation of agricultural leaders in setting up the new so-called master plan for agriculture is noteworthy. So we will just hope that government will maintain its view of dispensability. Agriculture is an indispensable part of the rebuild of the economy, because farmers are in the rural areas. Farmers buy inputs, they spend their money in rural areas. Most importantly, when a farmer makes a profit, he can afford keep his employment. And those people, when they spend their money, in rural areas. So it's, in my opinion, a very important link in terms of rural upliftment, rural development. And I think that's key to what is now needed to rebuild South Africa. So hopefully we will see that we do away with all kinds of red tape, make the policy environment more conducive for farmers to perform as they normally can. And I think that government is understanding that. My hope is that we will not use the master plan from a government point of view to hide, behind that and say we have a plan, but You have a plan, but you must work your plan. And I think that's a challenge now. Once that's been negotiated, we have to work the plan.
Kobus, I'm going to ask one final question, a brief answer if you can. Forgive me if it's a slightly unfair question in such a short amount of time. How concerned is the agriculture sector about the possibility of 100 days of blackouts? I understand we're talking about agricultural farming land, but there are mechanics behind farming as well. And what is happening over in Eastern Europe for exports and imports? Just very briefly, how concerned is the sector?
It will be a devastating blow, on two sides. In terms of, production, you must just imagine what happened if you have a load shedding and your irrigation stop, abruptly. You cannot plan for that. Secondly, we need the demand, we need the consumption, take off what we have. The offtake will also be affected, very, very, very significantly. It will be a disaster. But I think, farmers will cope. Many farmers already changed in terms of own energy sources, change to solar, etc., wind sources, etc. But as has been said by the executive of Eskom, government needs to pull up its socks in terms of allowing alternative green energy to come into play. That's needed. And we saw in some instances in the Northern Cape where allegedly the system, the grid, cannot take what can be produced in terms of clean energy. So that needs to be attended to very shortly, that we light up and keep the lights up and running in the rural areas, and that will make a huge difference in terms of agriculture's ability to participate in the turnaround and the rebuild of the economy.
Yeah, IPP has to be the conversation going forward. Always good to speak to you, agricultural economist Kobus Laubscher joining us. Don't go anywhere. 7 o'clock headlines on the way for you next.